Eye on the Storm, Hurricane Season 2019.
All right, good evening and welcome to a special edition of Eye on the Storm. It's a weekly show we do right here every Wednesday at 8. But with Dorian set to impact a lot of people later this holiday weekend, we are here on a Thursday night, so thank you for joining us. We're going to dive deep into Dorian. I'm Chief Meteorologist Wes Hohenstein from CBS 17 right here in Raleigh, North Carolina. So a lot to get to with Dorian that eventually threatened the United States. And joining me in a few minutes, we're going to go down to Savannah, Georgia. Chief Meteorologist at WSAV-TV down there in Savannah, Chris Aldred, will be joining us. Their area is just outside the cone of probability. So during tonight's show, we'll be talking with her, but if there's anything you would like to talk to us about, we welcome your email as well as your contact on social media. Best way to get a hold of us is to drop us an email to sendit@cbs17.com. That's sendit@cbs17.com. Our digital team is keeping an eye on that email address. They'll let me know when we get some emails from you. And again, for getting in touch with us on social media, the best way to do it directly, I'm at Weather Wes Hohenstein. Just type in Weather Wes. Hohenstein, I know, is a mouthful. It'll pop up. And if you want to get a hold of Chris down in Savannah, she is WSAV Chris with a K, K-R-I-S-A-L-L-R-E-D. All right, so let's get into it. So the big story today has to do with the forecast. The current conditions didn't change a lot, but the big story today was with the forecast. It slowed down again as it approached Florida, the forecast track, and it intensified. Now possibly it could become a Category 4 before making landfall. I'll get to the track in just a second, but I just want to kind of take a step back and look at the infrared satellite. It's starting to look more like a classic tropical system or hurricane. And if you look at the colors on here, and this tells us a story because each different color is a different temperature of the cloud top. We've got a lot of cold cloud tops that we can see here in red. So you see a lot of red. It's not like a radar red. But with all these cold cloud tops over the past several years, that has been an indication that the system is starting to or getting ready to intensify. So it'll be very interesting tonight for the 11 o'clock update, and actually for the 8 o'clock update, which we probably will have in a second here, to see if there are any changes in the wind speed or the pressure. But we also need to consider a couple things. So this is Thursday night, and because the system is such a slow mover, we've got a long time before it actually hits somebody. There's a lot of open water out there in the Atlantic. I saw a video today. People are already lining up, getting prepared in Florida, as they should, but a lot of us still need to wait and see what happens with this system. So it's moving about 13 miles an hour. Between the east coast of Florida and the center of the storm now, it's about 900 miles. Going 13 miles an hour, that's going to take a long time to get anywhere. So patience will be very important over the next several days. So again, here is the latest as we look live on one of 2 Hurricane Hunter airplanes just arriving on scene. They're based back in mainland U.S. now. This one leaving from MacDill Air Force Base just outside of Tampa. So they're going to be out there for several hours gathering information. Latest update, again, this looks to be the exact same as previous. So again, no changes for the 8 o'clock, but 85-mile-per-hour winds, gusting up to 105. Pressure has held. So pressure, the lower that gets, the stronger, the more intense the storm is. That hasn't changed, and it's still moving northwest at 13. So the most important thing that's going to happen over the next 24 hours is that direction is going to change if the forecast holds from northwest to west. That'll be very important because if that doesn't, the eventual landfall is going to be totally different. So all the information the Hurricane Hunter is collecting, going to meteorologists, going to the National Hurricane Center, going into the computer models. So let's look at the late afternoon runs of Hurricane Dorian. Again, this is the cluster, the spaghetti plots. There's a lot of different names for them, but these are several different model runs. And one thing we look at is where is the cluster of storms going? We're not going to look at this gray line that goes out to sea. That's an anomaly. And we're not going to look at this fuchsia colored line. That's probably just some bad data. Where is the cluster going? And you see they're all kind of clustered. I mean, there's a dozen plus lines here. They're all clustered together. That's telling us there's a lot of agreement in all the computer models that this thing is going to continue northwest and then, yes, make that westerly turn. That's going to happen through Friday and Saturday. Then as we get into late this holiday weekend, that's where things start to change. That's where the lines start to spread apart a little. Now, while most of them still bring a landfall sometime on Monday to the east coast of Florida, notice they're spread out a little more. That's telling us that there's more uncertainty, and that makes sense. I mean, we're 4 and 5 days out. You know, the farther you go away, the more difficult and uncertain the forecast gets. But you also notice that a lot of the models turn it to the north. And eventually that's going to happen. The question will be, and this will change everything, is it going to turn before it gets to land in Florida? Is it going to turn over Florida, or is it going to turn after it reemerges back into the Gulf of Mexico? Keep in mind, this whole time, this thing is going to be going 6, 7 miles an hour. And that's a whole nother part of the forecast that we'll jump into. The rain this is going to produce, because it's going so slow, is going to be catastrophic in some areas, more than a foot. And I'll talk about that in a second. Here's one of the problems. We talked about there's nothing out there to slow this thing down. There's no land, there's no more mountains, no islands. There's really warm water in the mid to upper 80s. The wind shear is very low, and there's a lot of moisture. Remember, we talked about how dry the Caribbean was? Now, that's not the case over the Atlantic. So all of this taken into account, here is the official forecast track from the National Hurricane Center. Again, continuing northwest, becoming a Cat 2 overnight, a Cat 3 on Friday, and then making that west turn Friday or Saturday, increasing from a 3 to a 4 as it skims the Bahamas and then approaches Florida on Labor Day. You know, throughout time, and I wrote this down, I wanted to share this with you, since 1900, there have been 9 hurricanes that have made landfall Labor Day weekend, and this could be another one. So this is the forecast cone. I added in just now the center line of that cone. That's from the 5 o'clock advisory. I want to compare that to the white line I just dropped in. That's the 11 a.m. advisory. And you see they're almost right on top of each other. So that tells us there's no change in the track, but it's slowed down again. And again, that's going to cause a lot of problems when it comes to rainfall. So here's a close-up view of the track. Remember, the cone of uncertainty is telling us where the center, where the eye of that hurricane could be in any given time frame. So I've superimposed what the hurricane is going to be like when it gets to Florida Monday at 2 o'clock. So it could be right here, and you see how far the impacts go. But it could also be at the bottom edge of that cone. A lot less people in the mainland U.S. affected. But remember, it could also be at the top edge of the cone, and a lot more people in Georgia, South North Carolina would be impacted. And at this point, we don't know where at in the cone it's going to be. So that's why we're packing our patience here. Now, I want to get back to that slow-moving thing before we bring in our first guest. And it has to do with this really great rule of thumb. You know, you learn these tricks in elementary school and middle school to remember state capitals or to math equations. There's a really great rule of thumb to figure out how much rain an area is going to get when a tropical system's coming based on its forward speed. So right now it's moving 13 miles an hour. By the time it gets close to Florida on Monday, it's going to be moving about 6 miles an hour. So this formula, and it works. I've tested it many times over the year. You take 100 divided by the forward speed of the system, and that gives you how much rain we're going to get. So by Monday, the system's going to be moving 6 miles an hour. 100 divided by 6, more than 16 inches of rain. So that is one of many problems that our friends somewhere in the southeast United States are going to have. A rain, a wind situation, storm surge, there's a lot of problems. And one of the places that's going to have some problems is down in Savannah, Georgia. And now we go live to Tybee Island, Georgia. That looks pretty now, but I don't think it's going to be that way in the next several days. Our friend Chris Aldred, the chief meteorologist at WSAV in Savannah, Georgia, is back with us. Chris, you talked to us several weeks ago, and one of the things we talked about is a storm surge. You're going to get into that, but kind of, I guess, first, right off the bat here, share your thoughts of what you're seeing with Hurricane Dorian.
Well, I love how you had to stop for a second and go the next several days, because as we have found out, the storm system is slowing down tonight. We're getting new data in all the time, and it's going to get more reliable in the next few days. And one of the reasons why you were talking about, you know, the planes, the hurricane hunters that fly into the storm system. Actually, something exciting from today. This is a photo of one of the flights that the Gulfstream special mission went into the storm system. What you will see here, the pilot crew, it's all females, and that's the first time in history that that has ever happened. Now, with the hurricane hunters, what they do is they fly in and out of the storm system for for hours and hours. And they send back that information. And when it does get back to us, we're able to have better information in order to have a more accurate forecast. Even launching more weather balloons is helping to get a better forecast. So tonight, hopefully into tomorrow, we have a better idea of exactly what's going on. So the very latest image of Hurricane Dorian, we are seeing some intensification tonight. The storm system is showing some similarities to what we saw with Michael last year, with how we're seeing how it's getting stronger and stronger. And that's the reason why with the forecast, we're talking about how it could become a major hurricane as early as tomorrow. Now here at home, here we are 1,000 miles away from this storm system. It's so far away, but we're already talking about flooding tonight here in Georgia and South Carolina. We have the new moon. We have easterly winds. It doesn't take much to flood around here also. And then you have the tropics. So there has been a coastal flood warning that has been issued already for us. Now what this means, if you're watching from another area, our high tides and our low tides, there's a huge difference. Huge difference. We're talking 6 to 8 feet usually. So when the high tide comes in, a lot of us that live along the coast, you will see that salt water start to creep up on your property. It'll start to flood. It can get so bad that some of our roads even have to be shut down. Tybee Island, you were taking a live look just a moment ago. Highway 80 is the only road that goes out to Tybee. It can get covered with salt water and you can't cross the road. It gets closed. So tonight with our high tides, 8 o'clock is actually happening right now for Fort Pulaski, and then 9 o'clock is the high tide in Beaufort. With the warning, you could see some flooding 2 to 3 hours before the time of high tide and 2 to 3 hours after. And this is going to be an issue that we are going to see for the next West, as you said, several days. We're already getting reports right now in Charleston where it looks pretty bad. So let's talk about the forecast track. We have been looking at different weather models, and the first one that we're going to look at right now is the European model. Now, there are some differences, so we're going to run them back to back and then show them to get together and compare them. With the European model, it's looking more organized as it does track toward the Bahamas. All of a sudden, it wants to take a track more to the west, but that's not all. All of a sudden, it takes a dip and kind of goes to the southwest, and then finally where it could be making landfall right here along the east coast of Florida, right on the southern edge, and that may not happen until Tuesday night. So this is how slow the storm system is moving. Then once it does get onto land, once it does move, into Florida, if it does in fact happen that way, it could get stuck. And if it gets stuck, it could do what Wes was talking about, and that means dropping several inches of rain. That is one scenario. Now we're going to take a look at the American model. And right now, you can already tell just the way that it initializes. It doesn't look as organized, it doesn't look as strong. So already, just at the very beginning frame, they are already different in what they think. So with this comparison with the storm system moving right toward the Bahamas, once it reaches there Sunday morning, the storm system goes more to the west and goes a little bit to the northwest, giving it a landfall to the north of Miami. And then once it does move into Florida, again, it could possibly stall and it could drop several inches of rain. So we've seen a big difference in the forecast track today as far as the timing and then the possibility, what's it going to do? Where is it going to make a landfall here? Florida? I mean, even the cone of uncertainty right now even includes parts of Georgia. So things could definitely change. And then when it does get over land, what's it going to do next? I mean, we have tracked storms like Harvey. We've tracked storms like Florence, where they dropped an incredible amount of rain, and they were only tropical storms when they did that. So we have to be very careful not to focus on whether it's a tropical storm, category 1, 2, 3, or 4. Every single storm system is unique. But with the European model, it has been a little bit better in picking out that little dip when it went off to the southwest. It did really well with Irma. You remember 2 years ago, we got hit with Irma. We saw flooding with Irma, but it didn't do too well with Florence. So, run to run, model to model, year to year, storm to storm, you have to look at what's working and what's unique. Now, one reason why the storm system is going to be tracking to the west, possibly southwest or northwest, has to do with the high pressure systems to the north and how strong they are. The stronger that high pressure system is to the north, the more Dorian will track to the west. The weaker it is, it won't. And that's the reason why some weather models are predicting, some are thinking that it could even get up to the east coast of Florida and then travel right up the east coast and head north, which would be similar to what Matthew did back in 2016. The other reason why the storm system could stall, besides the fact that we have high pressure to the north, you also have other storm systems coming in from the west, and we could be tracking a few cold fronts next week. Cold fronts that move across the country, but by the time they get to the coastal empire and low country, which is where we are in Savannah, they fall apart, they stall, they just sit there. And what we see with tropical storms, what we see with hurricanes, they go with the path of least resistance. So they're gonna go where it's easy to move, the easiest place to move, and sometimes that's why they also get stuck. So here's the time frame for what you need to know here at home if you are watching in the Savannah area, Hilton Head area. We have great weather tomorrow. It's kind of hard to believe that we have this huge storm system so far. Over the weekend, normal summertime weather. And then, like you said, Wes, we've got several days before the storm system could possibly impact us here in South Carolina and Georgia. So we're talking about the possibility of next week. So I do want to stress, because we have been dealing with these types of storms quite a bit for the last few years. It would be nice to have a break, but you know, that's how it is living along the coast. And you may be asked to evacuate. It may be mandatory to evacuate, but you will be sitting down and making that decision. At least some people will, and you'll be asking yourself, what do I want to do? Well, already our coastal counties here in Georgia have been declared by the governor a state of emergency, and we will have to be watching the storm system and see what it does. But we've always said, all year long, have a plan, be ready to go if in fact you have to go, because you never know what could happen. So I have a story that I want you to watch, because with Hurricane Matthew, it was a mandatory evacuation. One husband, one father, he told his family, he knew it was a bad storm. He told his family, you go, but I am going to stay. And I want you to watch the story and see what happened.
I kind of get panic stricken anytime I load my kids up in the car and we leave to go somewhere, because I honestly feel like I'm never going to see my house again, because that's exactly what happened. We left, we evacuated, and never stepped foot in that house again. He grew up in a small desert community in California, had no idea what sort of destruction hurricanes can do. I'm going to stay. I don't want people robbing our house if we evacuate. Somebody needs to stay here. Told me he'd been in a helicopter crash and those things didn't kill him, and a storm wasn't going to kill him. Keep texting and calling Jeff and just pleading with him, saying, you still got time, you still got time. And I'm sitting in the hairstylist's chair, like just shaking. I contact one of my neighbors who did stay. They said, your house looks fine. And I was like, well, I haven't heard from him. Can you please go check on the house? Neighbors walked back there with me on the phone and said, oh God, we'll have to call you back. The two neighbors call me and say that the sheriff is here and they need to tell you he's in there, but we don't know if he's alive or dead yet. My kids were jumping on a trampoline, laughing, having fun, and I'm crying in the driveway with my friend that we were staying with, and my son comes over asking me what happened, and I just told him. Explain that to your children, why he chose stuff over being in their lives. A kid shouldn't have to be put through that. And he didn't have life insurance, there was not a will, there was nothing stipulating how to be taken care of. And by the time I had pulled into the driveway to meet the movers, my hands were so clawed up and my body was just trying to be in fetal position. I don't really know what was going, but I was just stuck and I couldn't breathe. And that's when I lost use of my left arm. I lost use of my left arm for about 3 months. It's a cycle. It's always circular. And some days it's fine. Some days it's not fine and it brings you to your knees and you're not even exactly sure what it was that took you there.
Year after, it's Irma coming through.
I just remember being in my kitchen in Savannah, unable to move, just being frozen and just needing to plead on Facebook for somebody to come help me pack so we could evacuate. I'm just panic stricken. The wind blew open our dog door and scared the mess out of me. My thoughts now almost always ultimately go to, what if this causes someone to die? You're not guaranteed your next hour. So don't be selfish. Leave. Everything is replaceable, but your life is not.
And that is, a lesson that we have to talk about, and we have to be thinking about our plans for the future just in case evacuations are called for. Now, this storm system is far away, and it's not moving very quickly, and we still have time on our side to get those plans in place. So, the best advice I can give to anybody tonight is to sit down and develop a plan, write it down on a piece of paper, and decide what you are going to do if, in fact, you were told that you have to leave. All right, Wes, back to you.
Now, tough story. Good lessons, though, for all of us to learn, Chris. I have to ask, we saw the video today. People are lining up in Florida to fill their propane tanks and, to grocery stores. That's in Florida. Anything happening around Savannah where people are noticeably getting ready for what might be coming?
Not really, but it is the talk of the town. I just ran to Walgreens about 30 minutes ago, and I got stopped 4 times with everybody wanting to know what the storm system is going to do. So you have mixed emotions here because we have been hit with Matthew, Hermine, and Irma, and we've had to deal with a couple of other storms too. So you have some people who are like, I'm not leaving no matter what. Nothing happened the first time, it's not going to happen again. And then you have others who are terrified, like in the story we just watched. So right now, I think for the most part, people seem to be staying calm and staying up to date and trying to stay informed. But you have to admit, though, with this storm system, we're getting new little tweaks here and there every single update. And it's one of those ones where you go, okay, what's going to happen next? So we're sitting on the edge of our seats, too, as meteorologists trying to determine what this storm is going to do.
Right. Yep. We're all right there with you. We're all meteorologists in storms like this. That is Chris Aldred. Chris, good to be with you again. We will talk to you down the road. She is in Savannah, Georgia. Next time you're down in that neck of the woods, check her out on WSAV. 14 years ago today, Hurricane Katrina made landfall in Louisiana. It's already been 14 years. Can you believe that? About 1,500 people died, and there was over $100 billion in damage. That's been 14 years. So here's what we've got again for the latest on Dorian. Still a Category 1 hurricane. Would not be surprised if the 85-mile-per-hour winds intensify for our next update, which will come our way at 11 o'clock. And it's a slow mover, so we have to pack our patience. But the first signs of a tropical system approaching Florida, these are the estimated arrival times of tropical storm force winds. Still off into the Bahamas Sunday morning. So it's not going to be until people are 2/3 of the way through their holiday weekend that we'll start to see those impacts. 8 p.m. Sunday on this forecast track, that's when they are expected to reach southeast Florida. Across most of the state by 8 a.m. Labor Day morning, and then they could reach the western part of the state onto the Panhandle by Monday night. Again, these are arrival of 39-mile-per-hour winds and higher, according to the current track from the National Hurricane Center. Again, our next update will be at 11 o'clock, and I mentioned this at the top of the show that hurricanes on the east coast of Florida are fairly common. Since 1900, there have been 8 of them that have hit the east coast of Florida as a Category 4 or 5. And these are the lists. And the last one was back in August of 1992, Hurricane Andrew. So we'll see what happens with this one as we will continue to keep an eye on Hurricane Dorian. So that does it for tonight. We're going to be back tomorrow night at 8 o'clock right here talking about the latest for Hurricane Dorian, of course, throughout the whole season. We are here every Wednesday night at 8 o'clock. So thank you for spending part of your evening with us. Live in Raleigh, North Carolina, I'm Wes Hohenstein.